how did you get enlightened to what the worldwide agenda was on so many things?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say I was enlightened. There wasn't like a moment of I think it was part luck, part hard work. I think there's a lot of these kind of self-help books that fly around, and I'll say they're very limited. There's an amount of truth in them. The power of intention exists. All these things, The Secret and all these other things. I read all of those when I was 18, 19, right? And they have elements of truth in them, but they also have elements of falsehood. They act like you attract into your life whatever bad. I don't buy that crap for 1 minute.
I'm not an
If you're you and you get raped by your uncle, it's not because you attracted that into your life. It's because your uncle was a piece of scum. Yeah. So what you have is very privileged, usually middle class Americans saying, "Oh, if you just do this and do that and just think positive, well, for you, born into a society built on genocide and slavery and reaping all the benefits of that, it's very easy to say, oh, if you just attract into your life wealth, you will have it." Nonetheless, there are certain habits you can develop that are useful to you in whatever environment you're in. That I do agree with, but pretending that that's the whole story is rubbish. And so for me, I was fortunate. I had very radical parents, both my mum and my dad. Even though I grew up with my mum, and I saw my dad on weekends and holidays and whatever else. When I think about it now, they're both politically very radical, right? And so they encouraged me from very young to question everything, even them, actually. They didn't always like it, but having parents that gave me that sense that authority wasn't beyond recourse. It wasn't my way or the highway. Put up or shut up, children should be seen or not heard. It was like, so what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Blah, 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 right? And my parents both had difficult times in school. They were from very difficult, very troubled backgrounds that could have turned them into the kind of people that were like, oh, my kids are doing well. You know, this happens where parents become resentful of their children even. And I don't mean that as a slight to parents. It's real. If all your life goals have been frustrated by a society, right? And then you see your children bucking those trends, your insecurity might make you pull them back and want less for them and squash them. And all of those things happen between even people that love each other. My parents didn't do that, neither of them. They both were like, I want my children to see things that I never saw, to go places that I never went, to live almost vicariously through their children. And I feel like, I mean, it's not just my older sister. I've got a younger brother who's just travelled the world. He's a cruiserweight boxer. He does loads of other things, has many skills. He can fix anything. He does decorating. He's a multiple skill guy. I've got another younger sister who's a carer. I've got another younger sister who's a professional stunt woman. And she's done big films as well. Like, she's done stunts in very, very big production films. So it's like, we're not all same mum, same dad, but I feel like in our family there was a certain radicalism and a certain culture present that gave most of us the tools and the equipment to be prepared for the kind of society that we would face. So no, we would have to work twice as hard. That's normal. Like 10 times as hard. That's normal. But on top of that, to understand what the game was and to maybe have the support to think a bit more entrepreneurially. Because my mum and dad weren't even together when I was born. They'd split up by then. So I didn't grow up in a traditional married family. So I haven't had the same pressures of, you must marry this person from this rank and you must marry up into a better family that are doctored. My mum was just like, yo, if you love someone, boom, do your thing. Yeah, I don't really business. Same with my dad. So there are a lot of those pressures that can even come actually with middle class families that make people make decisions that are probably not in their best interest. There's nothing wrong with going to uni and getting a job if that's what you want to do. But if you wanted to become a graphic designer or a novelist or any of those things, I've seen this, where grown adults still wanting their parents' approval choose to go and become doctors and lawyers because their parents said so. And they don't want to be doctors and lawyers. And actually for their mental and spiritual well-being, it was a poor decision. And even for their financial well-being. Talented people who probably could have been amazing at something different, but even in a middle class environment, those kind of bully, which is what I think it is to a degree, you know, your parents bullying you to become one career or other.
But is that based on that that's all they know?
I'm not knocking parents, you know. I get it. In a capitalist society, you're defined by what you are, what you do, what you have. I'm not blaming the parents. It's societal. But I was lucky enough to have, even though we were poor, to have parents that were open-minded enough to say to me, no, go on, take them risks. Same for my sister. It was difficult for my sister, I'm not going to lie. She done well in her A-levels. I never went to college in the end, right? Well, I did a bit of it because I was doing a football scholarship. I didn't finish. My sister done very well in her A-levels, despite living in a hostel, right? And having all other kinds of challenges. And it came time, and Boo had just been made in her. But it's not out yet, so no one knows Boo's going to done the dance. She's got this dub plate she's made with sticky. She's got an offer letter to go uni. And she's trying to convince my mum, yo, I'm going to see where this garage thing takes me. I'm not going to lie, my mum she didn't force the issue, but she was like, rah, what do you mean you're not going to go uni? Like, for real, like, you're not going to go uni. Like, my mum wasn't over the moon, but she still had enough spirit to say, all right, go on. And my sister had enough character anyway that it wouldn't have mattered what my mum said. My sister would have been like, this is what I'm doing. And it panned out. And I see loads of people in those kind of scenarios. So I feel like, but we also have to be honest that there are not enough seats at the table for everyone. In a society run like it's run on inherited privilege, and people like me making it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that this system works. Exceptions prove the rule. The fact that I'm an exception, I'm not much brighter than people that I grew up with. I'm not much more creative. I've had some lucky breaks along the way. I've had some support along the way, and I've had some inherent characteristics, and those combine in a weird way. But what usually happens is people want to be naive to the larger political and social forces and say, well, I'm a poor person that made it. My life's all right. Why couldn't you? Why didn't you just work harder? Why didn't you read more books? Why didn't you go uni? The fact is the vast majority of people that play by the rules do not make it, do not end up doing what they love for a living. That social contract is not being fulfilled because we live in a society in which it cannot be fulfilled. The kids of people who go to Eton are not going to compete on an even level, pound for pound, with me and you for jobs in the marketplace. They're going to run daddy's company. Because if they have to compete one-on-one with people who've made it from nothing, not had the privilege, not had the act, they're going to lose. That's obvious. I've trained harder than them. Of course they're going to lose. Other than, the Stephen Hawkins of this world, who are just, strange guys, just born crazily intelligent. Those freaks of nature that exist in every privileged, underprivileged, every racial group and religion. We don't know how those geniuses are born, but they exist. Other than those people, rich kids are not any smarter than anyone else.
Entrepreneurship, you touched on it, and a lot of people talk about the whole Dame Dash. It's like a philosophy about people being their own bosses and generational wealth. And how do you look at it? Because like you're 30, you're a grown man, you've acquired wisdom and knowledge. Do you start thinking about your future, like your kids, and how you're going to do things for them?
I'll be honest with you, I don't believe capitalism is the ultimate form of human organisation, necessarily the most fair. And I don't believe in inherited class privilege. That's not to say I wouldn't help my children, but my main aim in life is not to set up some big business so my kids are millionaires so they can go sunbathing every year and go to private schools next to other rich kids. That's not how I think about the world, and that's not what my vision for the world. I understand why for a lot of people from tough backgrounds that becomes the way they see things. I don't ever want my kids to go through the stuff that I went through. And to a degree I share that. But I also don't really give a damn about living in a mansion and driving a Lamborghini. I wish I did, but I wish those things motivated me, because people would be more like, rah, do you know my man's driving this or he lives there? But I'm just not that bothered about those things. There's things that I find more important, and I find inspiring other human beings more important. It's ironic that me seeing the world that way has brought me some degree of financial security. But I don't think, particularly for black people, if we understand the history of the way European capitalism developed, it's very dangerous for us to say this is, the aim. The aim is to become just Warren Buffett in blackface, Donald Trump in blackface. What's the source of the wealth of these people, these legitimate corporations that we're imitating? Where do the minerals come from that are in all of our products? I'm not going to name any individual corporations, not because I'm scared, it's just because I don't want to give them free advertising, and I'm a hypocrite. I use their products. But the coltan that's in all of the mineral-based products in this room, I know where it comes from. Most of it comes from the Congo. How many people have had to die for that to get there? So do I want to be like the companies that run this thing and be seen as a legitimate businessman that does nothing but exploit the poorer half or the poorer 2/3 of humanity? Or is there another way of doing trade? And actually, when we look at history, and this is not to be romantic, there are other ways of doing trade. For hundreds and hundreds of years, East Africa, the Middle East, and the so-called Far East, China, India, etc., had a semi-global system of trade. Was there forms of colonialism? Sure. Were there forms of forced servitude? Sure. Was it a paradise? Probably not. But for 600 or 700 years, we know for certain none of those civilizations were shattered by mutual interaction with one another. So on some level, they formed a degree of equilibrium in their trade and benefited from it. There's coins from China in Zimbabwe 1,500 years ago. We know these things, right? There's pieces of pottery from Lebanon in India. There's Gujarati merchants found off the coast of Madagascar. In fact, Indonesians came all the way from Java, they weren't called Indonesians then, to Madagascar. And so some of the indigenous population of Madagascar, all the way there off the coast of East Africa, from Indonesia. So there's been global systems of trade and cooperation. No one's saying that business, and if you got yams and I got planting, I want some yams to go with my plantain. Boom, let's do a swap. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is when I say, you got yams, I got plantain, and I want all your yams, and furthermore, I'm going to kill you as well and take your yams. That's the issue.
It's capitalism to an extent.
To an extent, certainly, that is the global system of economic exploitation we live in. So for me, I would like to see more economically privileged people of colour challenging systems of economic exploitation as well, not acting like, oh, well, we made it, we're balling now, we got money. I get that kind of foolishness, but particularly in Britain and America, we're of African origin, and the wealth of Britain and America are dramatically linked to the exploitation of Africa and the Caribbean. So directly or indirectly, whether we like it or not, we kind of benefit from that. Where does Jamaica's aluminium go? Where does Ghana's cocoa go? Where do and fine, there might be an African elite that facilitates these things to a degree, but those that haven't, where have they ended up? Dead. So for me, it's also about us not reproducing the same bullshit in blackface. Because I'm not, I've got money, so I'm better than you. You know, what are you leaving your kids? Okay, but some of the people that have changed history, particularly for black people, have not been rich people. Malcolm X wasn't a rich man. Harriet Tubman wasn't a rich man. Martin Luther King wasn't a rich man. You know, I could give you a whole list of people that have done far more for mine and yours access to sit in this pretty room and talk foolishness, right? And they weren't rich people. So I think we got to stay away from just valuing people because of the things that they have and actually look what they're bringing to the table. Personally, that's not me romanticizing poverty, because I also agree, like, I'm not one of these fools that thinks it's romantic to be poor. It's not a pleasant experience not having and being next to people that have everything. But what are we willing to do to not be in that scenario? Are we willing to do anything and F over anyone just to have a little bit of money in our pocket? I don't agree with that either.
Last couple of questions. When you look at the Fall on the album, it says, what does it say? The fall of the empire.
It's over, yeah. We're living through the fall of the empire.
Do you feel like that, or is that just a statement piece?
No, I genuinely think that we are living through the fall of Western empire as we know it, and I think that which is a good thing for humanity, even for the West itself.
Does that mean that China's going to come in and be...
China, India, hopefully parts of Africa, though Africa's still lagging behind in some ways, politically, particularly. Latin America, you know, we've had, even over the last 15, 20 years with the Bolivarian Revolution and all its implications, we've had some successful resistance to Euro-American imperialism. And China particularly is creating a difference in the world. This is not saying everything China does is wonderful. This is what happens, right? You can't have any nuanced view of people that are not white, right? So when you talk about European industrialism, people can say, oh, but it produced this, it produced moon travel. They can talk about all the good things it produced, and that's okay. Even though it was underpinned by slavery and mass class exploitation and genocidal rampage, there can be a nuanced view of what came out of it. That's cool. The moment you have a nuanced view of China or India or Iran, people are like, you're an extremist, you're sponsoring terrorism, you're this, you're that, whatever foolishness they want to come with, just because you don't think all yellow people or brown people or Muslims are bad. And so, not even the rise of China, the return of China, which has been the richest country on earth for most of the last 2,000 years. People who know history should know this. It's only really for 2 centuries that China wasn't richer than Europe, didn't have the highest GDP in the world. It's returning back to normal. What is abnormal is that 10% of humanity, Europe and their American and Australian descendants, dominated the rest of humanity for a brief period of time. That's now going to go back to normal, and Europe and America will have to sit down, or they're going to destroy everything. In my view, I don't think there's a middle ground. I think either we're going to have World War IV and everything's going to get blown up and everybody dead, or there's going to become, and ironically, this is one of the few things me and Adam Smith agree about. Adam Smith, the czar of capitalism, one of the things he did say is there may come a time when the savages basically have enough firepower that we can't commit genocide on them whenever we feel like it anymore. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And thereby bring about an equilibrium in the world. And I actually feel like we're in a stage like that. Europe would love to exploit China the way it used to, or the way it did for a brief period of time, because China was never colonizing the way Africa was, right? India is in sort of to be crude, somewhere between where Africa's at and where China's at. You know, India's just sent, it's one nation state, so that's very different. That's more similar to China. But it has more poverty in India than the 26 poorest African countries put together. But yet they've just put a satellite on Mars for a tenth of the price that NASA done it. What does that do to the world culturally when I start to think that scientists are Sikh men in turbans, not white men in coats? What does that do to me as a youth growing up in a village in India or in Nairobi or even in Paris, when the dominant image of scientists now becomes, but why shouldn't it be? India's got thousands of years of history of the pursuit of science, longer than Europe. So a stereotype that a scientist can only be one image or think one way or look one way is bullshit. And so to me, all of this is a resetting of the world. And sometimes we're so focused on what's wrong with the world, we don't look at the victories that were won. Transatlantic slavery was not supposed to end. It was made too expensive by resistance. Post-Haitian Revolution, it was no longer viable. It was going to end whatever happened. People can tell me whatever foolishness they want. Whenever we want, you can have the debate. We have the facts. We know why these things change. The limited forms of independence that countries in the global south had was not supposed to occur. In Zimbabwe, they won their limited independence through military resistance. If they didn't militarily resist, Zimbabwe would still be a white settler colony, which would mean very different things for the entire African continent. South Africa, whatever you think of the concessions that were made to ending the apartheid regime, without the country being brought to the brink of civil war in the way it was political apartheid when it never ended, white South Africa wouldn't have suddenly said, hey, we got a conscience. You know, we actually are not enjoying all this wealth exploited from all these Africans, we're just going to give it back. That was never going to happen, but resistance forced a limited form of change. But because it's not perfect and because it hasn't solved all the problems overnight, we sometimes get caught in thinking, yeah, but look how bad it still is. I agree. But I also agree that when we look at the long form of history, you can see all the signs there that Europe and America cannot continue to dominate the world forever. And like I said, for humanity, and even for humanity within Europe and America, this is a good thing. So I do believe we're living through, by the time I die, if I live to old age, I believe the world will be a dramatically different place and many of our kids will be speaking Mandarin. My little brother's already doing Mandarin GCSE in a state school. So people more above me politically know full damn well what I want, and that's why they're offering Mandarin GCSE. You think they want to teach their kids Chinese people's languages? Of course they don't. But like, yo, you might not be able to do business in 30 years, son, if you don't speak this language. So best you speak your Mandarin and go on.